NIO stock, short-term stock price action. What are we seeing? What are we thinking? Let's just jump right in and start. If you look at the bottom of the screen, I've got the three short-term stock price indicators for NIO that have held up pretty well as indicators for us. The first one referenced is trade volume, so we'll start there. If you look up above, what you'll notice is this side of the screen. And right down here, we've got the daily trade volume bars. This is during the day. The last time that NIO had a 100 million share trade volume day was back on October 16th, 2025. It's been quiet since then, quiet in terms of the volume being low. And with that, not surprisingly, we've seen the stock price come down as it is perhaps easier to be controlled by those who might be manipulating the stock price. The last trade day, by the way, so I'll give you a date and timestamp for this video, was January 16th, 2026. That was a day that I had kind of highlighted and was watching and tracking for a while now. And one of the reasons is this: the max pain price point, which interestingly enough is actually different now than it was. Now it's showing as $4.50. That's for the expiry of January 16th, 2026. So what's interesting to me is that this has changed. It was $5. Here's the crazy part. This big number is what caught my attention. The out of the money call volume was so much higher than anything else on screen for many months that I had recognized. And so that's why I started talking about it and watching it, because my thought was market makers who perhaps stand to profit the most from max pain coming in during this time frame would want to keep the price down. But what's crazy is if you'll notice up here at close on January 16th, it was actually above this $4.50 range. So if they wanted to make more money and could have made more money and were specifically targeting NIO, which I frankly don't think they were, I think they would have pushed it down below $4.50. This also could be a nod to things perhaps being about to shift or change to the upside. How about the second, though? If, once again, I'll ask you to look down at the bottom of the screen, the FTD, that second indicator. We did get some new data. And the new data that we got, which is delayed and lagged by perhaps over a calendar month. So this is how far out we are on this stuff. We never get to see what they're actually doing behind the scenes in real time. But this spike on the FTD side of things is over 4.5 million that was reported on a single day. And if you'll notice over here, you're seeing this is the last time NIO was around the $10 price point level. We've only had a couple of times where this level of volume was reported as FTDs. So that caught my attention. If we go back a little bit more or further, notice the absence of these bigger FTD reportings. So this is actually in line with a thesis that I've had and talked about, but I'm going to do a separate video for it, because the market maker, the suspicious short Citadel, as I've referenced them, I'm not going to be surprised if or when they end up going long on NIO stock. And it could happen this year in 2026. Shout out, and a special shout out to PB Peter Barker. Sending prayers your way, my friend, by the way. But I'm going to, when I do that video, because it was a comment that he had posed and I wanted to respond to it, but hadn't yet, I'm going to put a hashtag PB special. So you'll know that that's the video that I'm referencing, Peter, when I get it up. And I'm hoping to do that this weekend. But once again, if you look now at the big picture and when the stock price for NIO stock actually rocketed up, there's this obvious absence in my mind of the FTDs. But more importantly, if we're talking near term, this spike, this is a big number if you look back over the last years, even during this downtrend time. So perhaps there was some concerted effort by folks who were looking to maximize their profits, and not just with NIO, but maybe with others. I've also done a video where I talked about some other stocks, and I'm going to come back and do a follow-up on that as a separate video. So again, that's more content to come, but I didn't want to go too long with this video. I just wanted to highlight these things. Now, the sentiment part I think is really fascinating, because as the third short-term stock price indicator, I think you can make an argument either way. I think the NIO longs are becoming more and more confident. I think if we see a quarter four profitable report and it gets reported, let's say in March or April, then that could be very bullish. That could be a point at which Wall Street actually decides to do something, or maybe we'll even find out later that they've been doing something here in the early months of 2026, recognizing that. I don't know, but it's something to have on the radar. I think it's worth monitoring and tracking. As far as the bearish side of things, I think the argument to the bearish side is, well, that trade volume kind of says it all. With low trade volume and spiking elevated FTDs, and market makers having an advantage in profiting more from perhaps keeping price at a certain level. Now that I'm going to go back to this chart so we can revisit. Now that these almost 800,000 out of the money calls have expired, the interest level of folks to profit on this might drop off significantly, especially when you look ahead at how much smaller the numbers of those out of the money calls are moving forward, which is why I had kind of targeted and wanted to watch price action into this time frame, and then we'll see what happens starting in the week ahead. Of course, Monday the market won't be open here, but I'm really curious, and a shout out to Laser. I mentioned him in my last video, but he dropped his analysis and he's actually expecting a big move up perhaps for NIO in this next week. So let's see what happens. I love that he looks at completely different things than myself. And sometimes what we are thinking seems to align, but I'm not going to call for anything of a significant move to the upside unless or until we start seeing that big volume on the daily side of things. I think that will be our indicator. If we get multiple days of that, that could be a sign of sentiment shifting, and perhaps we'll see NIO make another huge run in this year of 2026, perhaps starting even in this first quarter. Have a great day or night whenever you see this. I'll be back with more content over this weekend.